Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. New week, new theme, and this week we're checking out EDM, electronic dance music. I don't think there's any way we could have started off this week without Aphex Twin. They're pretty much the biggest electronic group in the community. In this community anyways, the most popular group within this community. We've done a few Aphex Twin tracks in the past, both for full reactions and on the live stream, I think. So, let's dive into this and see what's going on with Xtal. Really interesting compression on the vocals and our snare hit. Make it sound like they're a bit muffled, like coming in from the other side of a wall. I like how he started off with the pretty typical untis kind of thing going on with the hi-hat and bass kick. And since then we have been adding syncopated ideas to both of those instruments that work very well in tandem with the syncopated snare idea. Putting a ton of echo on the snare now. It's kind of coming in on the right side as well too. A lot of patience with this track. We had our introductory idea, very simple, for a full minute before the snare came in, and we were in that last passage for 2 minutes 10 seconds before coming into this release. Once again though, a bit of a muffled sound on it all. I'm even starting to hear the bass kick as a little muffled. The hi-hat certainly isn't though. kind of hard to hear, but there are two melodies going on. Very clearly you can hear the hi-hat syncopated idea here. All right. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I expected out of an EDM week. It's a little chiller than I was expecting. It's a bit laid back, but uh, simple, repetitive, uh, a bit more layered though. And I think that's the first thing I want to touch on actually is the layering of all this. We enter the song with just got the bass kick coming in on the downbeats and the hi-hat hit on the offbeats. And that's what I was expecting most of the song to go with, and we stuck with that for a while. We had that organy synth in the background laying down the chord progression. We brought in the female vocals that is like I don't know, like a 3 or 4 note little lick, and just kind of present it and then leave. And then like a bar, 2 bars later, do another lick and leave. Just very ornamental stuff. We kind of reside within that. I don't remember if we had heard the glockenspiel style uh, instrument yet. I mean, it's all electronic, so I'm just gonna call it a glockenspiel because that's the closest analogy I have. Physical instrumentation, but there is a little bit of oh, we can also call them bells, just in general, pitched metal-based instruments. Um, but yeah, we have a little line back there from that. I don't remember if they were playing yet though. And we do this for a minute with, as far as I could tell, no change. It's, as I mentioned, a very patient track. The pacing to me is a bit slow, but that's also maybe the point of it. I mean, if we look at this objectively as electronic dance music, the purpose isn't necessarily to tell a story or to be a foreground element, it's background noise, to be a bit reductive. It's there to provide a beat and a vibe, and so that you can, dance to it. Now, I don't think that's all that electronic dance music is, but like I said, to be a bit reductive about it, the fact that it doesn't change for several minutes at a time, I think is something that we're in store for with the majority of this week. Now, going back to the idea of layers, we get out of our opening minute and we bring in what I think is the core section of the song. It's the one that lasts the longest. It's about 2 minutes and 10 seconds long, and it introduces most of the main ideas throughout the track. We expand on the bass and hi-hat idea, providing some syncopation to it. It's not just the bass kick coming on every downbeat. It's a bit of a danciness to it where it creates a bouncy groove. The hi-hat has its own thing where we get what was it? We get like a downbeat on one and then two and then an and of three or something like that. It creates a bit of a syncopation though at the end of it, which gives it a nice uh, like a stretching and release, where we kind of the beginning of the phrase feels a bit more rushed, has more direction, momentum, and then we slow it down a little bit towards the end of the phrase, which makes time feel like it's stretching out a little bit. Or it would if we didn't have other rhythmic elements continuing to lay down the core pulse here. But the hi-hat does move between driving and kind of laying back a little bit. The snare also comes in with its own syncopated rhythm, and between these three percussion instruments, we have our polyrhythmic idea going on. Not that it's polyrhythmic in concept, just that we have three different syncopated ideas existing simultaneously, and it creates a nice groove. So we got our layering there in the rhythmic aspect, but then we also have the synth, the female vocals, and our bells. And the synth is just pure texture. It sits in the background, kind of difficult to hear underneath everything. It's present, but it's difficult to single out. It's just chords all the time. And then on top of that, we kind of get this, it's not really a back and forth. Sometimes they go off at the same time, sometimes they're slightly overlapped. Like we'll get 75% of one of their ideas, and then we'll overlap for a bar or in a beat or two, and then the second idea will come through, but the vocals and the bells. And this creates a really nice element of counterpoint that I don't know if we can necessarily call counterpoint because that's typically dual melodies, and these are dual ornamentations. Little, little 2 to 3 beat licks here and there, but yeah, the way that they play off of each other is really nice. And like I said, they're working on different phrasing as well. So it's not like every 4 bars you'll hear the same pattern between the two of them. Occasionally they'll be right after each other. Sometimes they'll be going simultaneously. Sometimes there'll be a minor overlap at the end of one phrase, the beginning of another. There seems to be quite a bit of variation on the timing of these two. And it creates something that feels a bit less repetitive than it is. And it actually works really well, especially when you compare that against the syncopated beats from the drum kit. I'm just going to call it a drum kit. It's probably 3 distinct tracks in the DAW or whatever looping software. Probably using a looping software, yeah. Are looping, I mean, you make music, they're digital, they're workstations. Yeah, I guess looping software would be considered a DAW. Anyways, when you pair it against the syncopation in the drums, you actually add more irregularity to it. Like the drums are working off of a 4 bar, one bar phrase, right? I think 4 beats, maybe 2 at the most, depending on what your tempo is. But the 2 melodic riffs or licks are working off of something else. And so it's not just their placement against each other that's going to shift, but it's also their placement against the syncopation of the rhythms as well. As I mentioned, sometimes like the hi-hat at the beginning, the first half of its pattern is all downbeat stuff, which is going to feel very different than the offbeat stuff at the latter end of its phrase. And where that plays, the melody stuff against that is going to give us different juxtapositions in the rhythmic aspect as well. What I'm saying is there's a lot of variation going on here, and I think that's what helps it go by as fast as it does. You guys know me, I'm not a real big fan of repetition. I'm not a big fan of slow paces. I thought the song was over a lot earlier than I'd expect it to be for being a 5-minute track with a lot of repetition, and I think a lot of that comes down to the minor variations that we see throughout this section. It is, well, if we count all the percussion as one drum kit, there's 4 instruments here, and they all have very simple, short ideas. It really is the placements of them and their phrasings that keeps this section a lot more lively than I would expect. It allowed me to keep my attention on it. And I think it's one of those things that some people might overlook. They just hear the simplicity of it and say, well, it's a good beat, and it's nothing more than that. But there's a lot of work that goes into it to ensure that it's not the same thing over and over and over and over and over. That there's little changes here and there if you're paying attention. After this, we began to dismantle this sound, and we removed some instruments. We increased the muffledness, which I think is compression plus volume and maybe something else to some of the instruments. And we kind of cut back some of the extra noise and go to a very foundational view of what's going on here before pulling it all back up and then slowly picking it apart again until we end up with just like two instruments and then just the synth and then oh, it was a hi-hat and synth and then just the synth and then nothing, and that's how we end the tracking. So these last two sections could be seen as a variation on the section we were just in. Nothing really changes aside from sonic properties and which layers are active. But through that, we actually get some interesting ideas. The section that we kind of bring it all down a little bit musically is identical but feels completely new, and that's one of the cool things I think that electronica does better than most other genres is sonic properties, timbre, changing up the way things sound. Orchestras tend to do this by passing ideas between instruments. Maybe the brass will have a line, and then they'll pass that line to the woodwinds. And it'll be a woodwind only section. Maybe a tuba will sit in the back, and they might play it at half volume. So we have a completely different interpretation of the same exact composition. None of the notes have changed. We've just changed what instruments play it and how loud they're playing it. And we actually have a phrase for that. It's called tutti, Tutti. And it's usually a diminished, smaller version of something we've already done. Typically, it's when we pass something from the loud, brassy, double forte stuff to the woodwinds and have them play a little quieter. Um, so we actually see this in a variation in classical, but there's limitations, the physical limitations of instruments. Whereas with electronica, you have millions, billions, infinite even sounds at your fingertips and so many knobs and dials and effects to put on them. The possibilities are honestly limitless in how you can go about taking something you've written that is the same between two sections on paper, what you would actually write on sheet music, and crafting completely different sounding sections out of it based on the sonic properties, the timbres. And I really like that that's what happened here. It wasn't to the most extreme effect like I was just talking about with, the infinite possibilities of it, but still found a way to create what felt like a new section out of it. It felt like a diminished bridge. Bringing everything down, dropping well, I don't think the volume changed at all, but it felt like the volume changed. It felt like things got quieter and sparser. And that's something that I'm looking forward to in this week, just because electronica, I mean, it's like I said, it's one of those things that electronica can do better than most other genres, because of its complete reliance on digital sounds. And then the picking apart of layers at the end is, I mean, we've heard that in plenty of tracks. It's a neat way to go about doing it, but doing an ending, but there's nothing really interesting about it, at least from a story perspective, maybe narrative, what the song's trying to say to me. Speaking of that, so many elements in here feel muffled. I don't remember the bass kick feeling muffled at the beginning, but maybe it was, because I certainly got that feeling towards the end. But the hi-hat is very in your face. It's impossible to miss it. It's very clear. But the synth, the vocals, the bells, everything else feels like it's a loud concert, and I'm on the outside of it. Sitting against the wall, next to the front door, waiting for a friend to meet me so we can go inside and watch this. And that's exactly what a lot of this feels like to me. There is a general compression and muffledness to it that feels like I'm not right there listening to it. Aside from that, though, it's just dance music. It's not really saying much else to me. I'm curious if there's anything particular to this song that Aphex Twin wanted to put into it, or if this is literally just wanted to make a dance track for the album. Needed an extra track and had this great idea, and this, it feels good to dance to. It has a nice chill vibe to it, and just ran with it. Um, and see, that's another question, right, that I have about EDM that I'm kind of hoping will get answered this week, though I'm not fully expecting it to be. When I listen to rock, metal, classical, jazz, country, sometimes pop. I think usually more pop adjacent than top 40 stuff. I like pop rock or chamber pop or folk. Um, the music tends to be there to help tell the story. Even if it's an instrumental, there's going to be an aspect to it that, speaks to me. And EDM specifically, not all electronic music, but certainly EDM specifically to me is music designed to be background noise. Like I mentioned, it's designed to set a vibe and be danceable because it is, from my perspective, a majority of the time designed to be played in clubs for people to dance to. And I'm sure that that's not everything EDM is, but that's my perspective on it, given my limited exposure to it. And this song falls into that as well. Is there EDM that is, um, for lack of better phrasing, is there EDM that is art? And that sounds bad. But my idea that it can be viewed as a work of art with its own intrinsic values completely outside of any external situation. EDM to me is club music. It doesn't really work as well outside of that. Um, this specific song, I think, works well as maybe meditative, something to do work to, especially less physical work, which I think is interesting given that it's dance music. But, writing a paper or uh, reading a book to, more so than like doing chores or working out. And it's a bit too laid back for something more intense, but what I'm saying is it doesn't really tell me a story on its own. It fits best within other contexts, and maybe that's not what Aphex Twin had in mind when they made it. I'm really curious if he had a story in mind he wanted to tell with this track. And as we explore more music in this genre, I'm kind of hoping to find stuff that does tell a story to me. And I know that's a subjective read on it. Just because I don't hear a story doesn't mean there isn't one there, but I kind of want to find some EDM that speaks to me. That, at least to me, whether it's through my own isolated read of it or through conversations with y'all in the comments and getting your perspectives on things, works as something more than just a beat and a vibe. Those are my thoughts on Aphex Twin's Xtal, as well as some extra thoughts about EDM in general. What did you think? Let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed this or not. Anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to expand on what I said, correct me on, or give me your own perspective on. Above that, in the description box, if you could, find the link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to my Discord server, a link to my music, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection coming up. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Uh, Also, I just noticed that as my hair dried, it came around like mandibles on the back of my head, and I don't like that, but I can't seem to do anything about it. That's what I get for having curly hair. Or I mean, it's not really, it is curly, but it's just body full. I got a lot of body in my hair. Anyways, that wraps it up for today. Until next time, remember to be critical, it doesn't wrap it up for today, there's one more. But also, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.